It's the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast, where we talk about all things consensual non-monogamy, polyamory, open relationships, swinging, and how you can have secure and sexy relationships, no matter how you do them. Now here's your hosts, Tara and Andre. Hi everyone, please say hello in the chat, and you can tell us where you're from. So you're gonna be in charge of moving the notes, Andre, today. Okay. So you gotta do that, otherwise I'm gonna be like this the whole time.
I might like that.
So some people may be joining and don't know us, so I thought we should just at least say what we do.
Why don't we?
Do you want to start?
Sure. My name is Andre Turcotte, aka Sparkle Kitten, and I am a sex-positive psychotherapist here in Toronto, Ontario, but seeing people around the world quite literally via Zoom, which is, I guess, one of the blessings of COVID. People found out that they could work remotely, and in a way, it makes the world a smaller place because we are now coming together and live from around the planet. And I am happy to be partnered in a relationship with the lovely Tara Franco, relationship coach extraordinaire.
Yes, so I'm Tara Franco, relationship and awesomeness coach.
And awesome.
I put the awesomeness in
awesome.
because I feel like everybody needs a little awesome in their life. So,
indeed, they do.
Yeah, so I don't just do relationships. I do talk to people about things like we're talking about today, which is insecurity, beliefs, all those things. So yeah, so that's us. In case you also didn't know, so we do have these that are free, but if you need additional support, we both offer individual and couples therapy and coaching. And we're really excited because in November, we're starting our group program. It's immersive online experience. So you can join us anywhere in the world for that. And give us a message and let us know if you're interested, and we're happy to tell you about it.
Yeah, the thing I really like about our program, though, it's not just as though we created this program, put it in a vacuum and then sent it off. We are going to be doing live work with them, as well as the program that walks them through those steps.
I think that's what makes it unique. So we're doing live training and then live coaching as well with you. And there's going to be places, if you miss it, to keep all the stuff, fun exercises, because who doesn't like doing a good exercise? I mean, I do.
It's interesting, though, the metaphor of like doing a physical gym exercise, we might kind of go to it and be like, I don't really feel like going to the gym. And yet once we go to the gym, we're always glad that we went, right? So maybe it's hard to go through it. And I think it's the same thing with these exercises that we might look at them and be like, I don't want to really talk to my insecurities or my areas of discomfort. But when we go through them, like in our jealousy workshop, for example, we come out glad that we did it, right? It helps to create a better understanding where we're coming from, a better position, and we can move from levels of discomfort to levels of greater comfort.
Yeah, there's definitely can be some discomfort, but I find that it's easier to move through it when you actually face those discomforts.
And doing that, having gone through those things, we become empowered. We feel as though we're not just prone to jealousy, but we can find a very active way of doing something that's going to alleviate the level of discomfort. We are going to feel as though we are empowered by doing these things. So we resist the temptation to turn from it and just minimize it and think that there's nothing we can do, to the actual action part of it where we feel better in it, having done these things. So
I mean, for me, the difference in this relationship versus other ones is that, I really feel comfortable talking to you about things, especially like if I'm feeling insecure or jealous. And it's made a real difference for me. Like it literally changed my life.
Yeah, same here. It's so amazing. I was thinking back to my announcing what it was like for me before, being sort of monogamish, but not really subscribing to the ideas, and how I would be, avoiding that relationship escalator, or I would be in it and then I'd find ways of satisfying my other drives. And I was essentially lying. And I think the part of that I've come to realize is that it was difficult for me to lie about that, because I am, in fact, essentially an honest person, but I was living a lie. I was living the lie that I presented for myself and to other people. And it was not that honest. I was not that secure in announcing my true position. And then when things like jealousy would come up, it would be so strange, because I was like, well, wait a second, I want to do these other things. And yet when my partner might do it, I might feel jealous. It didn't make a lot of sense. But now, being open and honest with myself about it, I can also get in touch with my feelings, see where those parts of jealousy were coming in, and how I might be able to go beyond that, negotiate it, so I can have an open, happy, honest, loving, informed relationship.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's possible for everyone.
Yeah, totally. I think that's what happens. Like I talk to lots of people, as do you. And often what happens, especially when they're starting in open relationships, whatever they're doing, consensual, non-monogamy, polyamory, they get really excited starting. Like I just had a call this week. They get really excited starting like, yeah, let's do this. This is what I want. This perfectly aligns with what I want. They jump in and then they have that first instance of discomfort. And it's like, well, let's put on the brakes sort of thing.
Well, this isn't for me. I got to like abandon that idea. Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes you're well into it too when you realize that, because things start to change. Like you start to evolve your relationships or do different things. And so there's always a good time to talk about these things. So I guess we should jump into the topic.
In a way, right. Yeah. So we want to jump into it. And then we may or may not have done the information, usually not enough, the information gathering to find out, well, what is it actually going to be like to participate in this and what feelings might come up. And we think like, oh yeah, it's going to be fantastic. And which it often is in many aspects of it, but there are also the other sides of it. What are the possible consequences to it? How am I going to deal with my jealousy? Am I aware of to what extent I might have these feelings of insecurity come up? And right now we're going to talk a little bit about insecurity.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of my partners told me like the first time that he and his wife went to a party, it was like, they were like all set, thought they were all set for it. And then, he saw her having sex with somebody and it was like, oh, okay, yep, can't unsee that now. Right. But, they kind of talked about it and then realized that they missed some conversations. So, it's never too late to go back and, deal with those things, because that does happen. I think it happens to everybody.
Never too late. In fact, we're inviting it, right? We're wanting to come back and take a look at it. But it's interesting, the idea that they might have gone into us and now the one person feels like I cannot unsee that. Yeah. And it's true. You can't unsee it. The box is open. It's been witnessed and experienced. But how will I live with that? How will I either have that be the most horrific, worst experience ever, or how can I right size it to where it is and figure out what is really so triggering about that? What are the components that make it feel as though I can never unsee this? So it's seen, but what is it about having seen that scene that is so unacceptable? Can I get to a better place of understanding it, see what's at play, and then move from there? And we think that, yes, absolutely, you can. You can figure out what is at play, what do you find most threatening, most triggering, and how can we adopt another position towards that, another understanding of it. And it's through understanding, right? By being able to look introspectively, see what the components are, and then make the assessment from there and address those issues.
So that's a good summary of what we're going to talk about today. So let's first start with, it's always good to start with, I think, a definition of insecurity is. Because, I think we know what it is, but I like these definitions because they brought a little more. I think we can talk a bit more about the things. So one of them was uncertainty or anxiety about oneself, a lack of confidence.
Sounds like an inside job.
Inside job.
An inside job. So we have this estimation about how we are, and we might do like the compare and despair, and naturally we will come up short. We will imagine that the other person's more beautiful, they're smarter, they've got a bigger this or a smaller that, or whatever the fantasy is.
This or a smaller
well, that. But whatever it is, we're going to create some equation where we don't measure up, that we're not going to be good enough. So we've essentially created this inside job where we're not going to be sufficient. It's going to create a perfect bed for these insecurities to play in our.
Right. And it could be something, it's not necessarily situational. That feeling can be brought up from a long period of time of feeling uncertain in one's life too.
Right. Well, that's, I think, a very important part to consider as well, right? So is this something that is historic and I'm bringing with me part of my repetition, or is it really an induction into something that's being played out now? It's interesting to notice, I might feel a certain way with the majority of people or with some partners and feel rather secure. And then I might get with another partner and feel not so secure. So if that is the case, then it's alerting me really to the circumstance and less about perhaps the history of it. Whereas I might go into just about any situation and always feel secure or always feel insecure.
Okay.
So I think that's going to inform us on to what degree it really is an inside job and to what degree it might be circumstance. So those are good things to know. So we're gathering that data, we're gathering that information, so it might help inform us as to where that remedy lies, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the first thing you can do. But
that was one part of the definition. You have another definition.
Yes. So the other part is the state of being open to danger or threat with a lack of protection. I think sometimes our insecurity can feel like something is dangerous or
For
threatening. Sure. And sometimes I think we need to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I remember I went to this Oprah thing once and she was saying, pay attention to what people say and do. They will tell you things. So but sometimes I think we don't often pay attention because we don't want to believe the things that we see. But sometimes we're also making it up.
Making it up?
Sometimes we create this in our heads, right? Too, like because we've got some sort of like deep-seated insecurity about ourselves in general. Were you waiting for me to say something else?
No, but it is, I think it's imperative that we are able to really try and make that distinction between where it's coming from, if it's within us or if it's being broadcast by something else that's triggering us this way, because it will then help us in addressing where we might go at it to alleviate those concerns.
And then the remedy is often something, it could be simple, it could be something a bit more intense, depending on the time of period. Like you could be feeling insecure in your life for a long period of time, like from the time of childhood. And that can have a huge impact on so many areas of your life.
Absolutely.
Like I've seen, I mean, have you seen that with people? I'm sure you've seen that with people.
I've seen that within myself.
Yeah, me too.
Right. Yeah. If you're able to be honest with yourself, I think you get plenty of indications in it, right? There's many opportunities to observe it. But yes, you also see it in others as well.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine and we were talking about how we still see ourselves sometimes as that like high school student that got picked on. At least I do. Like you have this perception of yourself and it's sometimes hard to shed it.
But, you know, I think it goes even well beyond the high school demonstration. There is a school of thought that says that life is but a repetition of the first 18 months of life. So the feelings of danger, the feelings of insecurity, all those things are simply replayed over and over. It's part of the repetition, right? The question is then, how do we move beyond that repetition? How can we address those insecurities and find ways of creating newer forms of secure attachment if it's never been known to us? So, and there are ways of doing that. There are definitely ways of.
We did in some of the research we did to prepare for this, looking at articles and stuff. You thought it was interesting that they were making the linkage, which makes sense, of insecurity and individuals with insecure attachment in relationships.
Sure.
And it said that they've been found to be more likely to interpret a partner's behavior as hostile or negative.
Right. And that's completely understandable, right? So when we are feeling insecure, we are feeling obviously less secure in the knowledge that we are going to be safe. So what happens is we are alerted in this feeling of insecurity, and then we start to create the evidence to support that, as you would say, right?
Yes.
So we are then looking for ways of justifying our insecurities. Oh, they never do this, they never do that. And we start to catastrophize. We start to speak in terms that are very black and white, in terms that are absolute, like always and never and all those things. And we will feed all of that. So what we want to do then, hopefully, is to find that awareness, right? Where we're recognizing our tendency to do that, that it is our insecurities that are feeding themselves, and we can arrest it by that acknowledgement and then offering something different, an alternative. What might be the alternative?
Exactly.
Well, what might be the alternative? We are then able to look to evidence that counters that. We can identify this negative voice, this negative self-talk that we are offering, and have the awareness to offer the alternative to that. So rather than saying, I'm never going to be this, I'm not this, or I'm not enough of that, or they're always that way, we identify that and we substitute it with something else, something that is countering that will balance it. Yeah,
because we do have evidence of our lives where we've been successful, or anything that we're feeling negative about. I think we often can find evidence in our lives that we've been different in another circumstance and can remember that. And I like to say creating the positive stack. That's my favorite thing when I'm working with clients, is like when you're changing your beliefs, is to have other beliefs and find the evidence to support that. So. And I think in relationship, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, just that idea of the positive stack, I think, is wonderful. Those are affirmations that we're able to repeat, to use ourselves. And what happens is, in a very rudimentary way, is we are kind of turning down the volume of the negative speech and turning up the volume of the positive speech. And that it is valid, and it is perhaps not so comfortable or somewhat unfamiliar for us to do that, but there is empirical evidence to support the benefit in doing so. So allow yourself to recognize how fantastic you are and repeat that aloud. Even if you're not quite believing it at that moment, there is evidence to support that it is beneficial for you to do so. So do it.
smiling because like one of the exercises that we have in the program, and one that I've done with clients before quite successfully, is the unleashing the inner hero exercise. So it's like an inner hero versus inner villain. And part of that in the recognition, like you were talking about recognizing these things, is you actually name them. And you like, they have like, what do they like? What's your inner hero like? What's your inner villain like? You know, what's their name? And some of my clients have really taken on to this. Like if you caught the podcast we did with James CS, Positive Practicing Polyamory.
Great show.
We'll put another link to here. We did a talk on there, and that was one of the most powerful ones he found, because he loved naming those people. And now he sees himself as Redeemer, his inner hero. So I thought that was like a fantastic story. So
well, we're using the visualization in that also, right? So we really help to see it. And it's kind of the idea of the negative self-talk as well. If we were to take it from the I statement, so I'm not good enough, I'm not tall enough, I'm not fast enough, I'm not whatever it is, and we can depersonalize it by seeing it in the third person. Andre's not good enough, Andre's this, Andre's that. We can kind of put some distance from it and see it a little bit more objectively. So we can, I think it's the same thing in the exercise you were saying, we can visualize that, and helping to visualize it, we can see it as a third. And it's sometimes easier to recognize it when there's a little bit of distance, but it's also easier to adopt it. And we can go to that character, that persona, and incorporate that and say, well, I am the rescuer. I am the one who's going to solve this, and allow for it. So it might be harder sometimes to allow for it in the personal, but if it was somehow in the third, it might be somewhat more acceptable.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to try that. Do you have some insecurities yourself?
No, I'm perfectly secure in every possible way. Of course, there are always these old insecurities that will come forward, but I've done a lot of work in being able to recognize them, and I'm alerted to when I'm feeling them. And then I kind of look at, well, where might they be coming from? What is going on in the moment that's triggering them? And what might I offer myself as an alternative?
Exactly. I think that's what I call upon when I'm feeling jealousy, because I do have jealousy, because, at times. But I think because of the awareness of things that are triggering, I can kind of recognize what is going on.
So it makes me wonder about the idea of jealousy, how we say that it is a conglomeration of emotions, right? It is several emotions at play. And when there is something happening that's coming out, can we identify which emotions are at play that are creating these feelings of jealousy?
And insecurity is often one of them, and all the fears. But I think we're going to talk more about jealousy next.
J is for jealousy. I was going to suggest jilling, but there are a whole bunch of other things.
I don't know what that is. Yes.
Do you know what jacking off is?
Yes.
Well, jilling off. Jack and Jill.
Interesting. Learning something new every day. So we kind of covered some of these things. We said there was 3 things that you can do to address your jealousy. So we can go over them again. Sure. So the first one was introspection. So identify and look at the root of your insecurity.
Right. So gather the data, right? Look at what is at play. Try and create some objectivity, right? We might be able to kind of pull ourselves out of it and look at how we are in this. See if we can see it from, bird's eye view, and see where we are in this and what are the factors around it. Because sometimes when we're too much into our own feelings and thoughts, it's sometimes harder to see the forest through the trees, if you will.
Yeah, sometimes too, even if we're feeling insecure ourselves, we can probably recognize it when other people are too. And that can be a source of information. Like, what was I thinking when I experienced that situation? Right. It's like, oh, I have that too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Which is, one of the benefits of being in group also, right? Is that you hear other people say it and you're like, oh yeah, like, I remember feeling like that, or I saw that. So it's easier sometimes to recognize. Even Freud himself thought that self-analysis was extremely difficult because of our own blind spots and our own emotional investments in it. But when we can have some distance, a little bit of separation, sometimes it's easier to identify those things ourselves. But the idea is introspection. We want to be able to look at what's our part in it and what is the root of our insecurities, right? Where did they come from and what is really at play? So we can kind of unpack it, look at those components, and then go about addressing those.
Yeah, it's a lot about mindset. Even though, like you said, we do self-analysis on ourselves, right? We're coaches and therapists ourselves. We often need help too. Like I work with a coach who's amazing, and because sometimes I can't see the things that are blocking.
But I think also coaching people, therapists, them, one of the benefits in talk therapy is that we get to hear ourselves. We hear our own insanity, right? And we might hear like, yeah, it's crazy that I should feel, so insecure, so jealous about this person, when in fact the demonstration, the evidence there's not really that much evidence to support this position, right? So we might be able to hear it and identify it. So the introspective part.
But sometimes I think, though, we were talking earlier before we started, is that sometimes it is real information.
Oh, for
so
sure.
It's also being able to recognize when you might be lying to yourself and you're insecure for a reason. I mean,
well, yeah. So it's kind of like anxiety, right? We might say, well, I never want to feel anxious, but yet there is necessity and benefit to feeling anxious at times. So crossing the street, you might be anxious. Well, and for good reason. There are cars coming. So you want to have that heightened sense of anxiety. So what's happening is we don't necessarily want to feel jealous, but they are alerting us to certain dangers potentially. And then we want to find a way to move beyond just feeling the danger, feeling as though we can still be secure, even if there are aspects that are needing to be addressed.
Awesome. Okay. So that was number one, introspection, identifying.
Right. So then once we have been able to identify these things, or maybe we don't have them completely done to 100%, but we have some introspection, then we can communicate both to others, but also to ourselves.
How do you communicate to ourselves?
That recognition, right? So what was it that was so triggering? What was it that was at play? And being able to look introspectively, we are then informing ourselves. We are communicating to ourselves if we're really earnest in it, if we're trying to be as open and honest with ourselves as we can be. So these feelings are alerting us to some type of imbalance. I have too much of something or not enough of something, and how can I get to where I will feel more comfortable? So we're communicating that to ourselves by being able to well, initially, even having the demonstration of willingness to look at these things, because very often something like fear or jealousy, whatever it is, we might want to turn and simply run from it, or put something in its place to buffer as a defense against those things. So we're not really being as introspective. We're not being as willing or open to look at these things. They may seem very overwhelming, very difficult in the beginning, kind of scary. But if we walk through them, if we work through them, we can shed light on them and put them in their right size, find out that they are in fact survivable, and that we can go beyond this simple position of feeling overwhelmed by them or powerless over them, that we can feel self-empowered.
Yeah, I think sometimes when I'm feeling jealous and insecure, my first reaction, if I'm not being self-aware, is some aggression. Like I can be sarcastic, or we've experienced that for sure, where I've had feelings of jealousy around something, you being with a partner or something. And, if I don't sit with it for a second, I can be, I'm not describing it very well.
I think we all get that way, right? So what happens is
get like sarcastic or negative or like blaming.
Something's going down. We get into this position, say like jealousy, for example, and it is off-putting to us and we're not wanting to feel it. So we erect a defense, and very often the defense comes in the way of being aggressive. It's a wonderful defense, right?
Or setting up rules, like really rules that we think are going to protect us, or pulling back from agreements in our relationships. Sorry, I feel like I keep jumping in.
Well, you have a lot to say about it. I think that's great. We're to say everything, right? That's that's sometimes sounds like the easiest part, and sometimes is the most difficult part, to really try and say everything about it, talk about our thoughts and feelings, find out what's at play, where we're coming from, and communicate it to the other person. Having that dialogue will be part of the remedy, right? So we gather the information, we identify it, we communicate it to ourselves and to another, and then we find out what would be necessary for us to move beyond that position. Therein lies the remedy.
Right. I think sometimes, though, like I've experienced with people that I've worked with, they talk about like they want to communicate their feelings, but sometimes they worry that they're over communicating. Like, how much do you communicate? How do you, if you're so overwhelmed with jealousy or feelings of insecurity, sometimes they feel it's so overwhelming that it can fill the room. Sometimes it's the only thing they talk about. And so they don't want to do that because that causes other issues in the relationship. Like how can people?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it's a bit of a balancing act. So you want to be able to share with your partner or partners, all those things. You want to be the recipient of them. But at some point, yes, does it become too much, as though we're using our partners or our friends, or our loved ones, whoever, as our therapist? It may be a disservice both to them and to ourselves. So at some point, we might have to recognize that, yes, I wanted to adjust this, my ability to self-soothe or adjust things on my own may not be quite sufficient at this moment, and I might need or benefit from seeking counsel of others.
Some support, which is where number 3 comes in. You're such good at segueing. So determining a remedy. So what can I do? What do I need from partners? Can I get help? Those kinds of things.
Right. So if we feel secure enough to articulate what it is we're wanting or not wanting, that's wonderful. We can go at it and let it be known to our participants as well. But if we're not yet feeling that, or if we feel as though we need some additional help, then yes, we should seek the advice and counsel of somebody who's in a position to help us in that.
Yeah, because I think sometimes, and this goes back to what I was just saying, is that we can communicate how we feel, but sometimes we don't have necessarily the answer. Yeah, right. So sometimes the remedy. Like I was speaking with a couple last week, and one of the things we're talking about is the one person in the relationship is quite overwhelmed with jealousy leading up to the other partner going out because they have a regular date with someone. And they had talked about something about a check-in, and the other person doesn't always do it. So they're out on their date all day because they have to go to a distance. So they're gone for an entire day. And so she wanted a check-in, and he wasn't always doing it. And I said to her, if he checked in once during that time and said, hey, I'm thinking about you, how would you feel? And like, that would make a big difference for us. So sometimes it's a simple thing. Like I know we have a bit of that. Like when we go out on dates, we often will do a quick check-in just to say hi. And that's reassuring. Like that might not be the remedy, but that is a possible remedy if that works for you. But it depends on what your love language. Like there's a lot of dependencies, right? And it's hard to sometimes find that remedy.
But in this case, we're talking about that idea of pre-care, care, and aftercare, and how we're able to demonstrate that. But really, I think that comes with the idea that we were able to communicate that we might want that sort of thing, right? The words of affirmation, whatever our love language is. But all that comes, I think, to the first step, and that is part of the discovery, right? Being able to identify these things and then being able to communicate it and then seeing how we're able to get it. But even though I've been able to identify it and communicate what I'm wanting, it may still fall short. There may be times when I failed to give you that level of care at that time. So what can you as an individual do to self-soothe, to create that feeling of insecurity? That's interesting, right? But you know what? It's actually very telling. We do create the insecurities. It's an inside job, right? So because I could feel secure or insecure. Whenever I take that elevator ride, how am I going to experience that elevator ride? Is it going to be the most fantastic adventure, or is it going to be the most horrific adventure? It's an inside job. I'm creating those insecurities, or I am addressing them and feeling more secure about it. But I'm communicating it towards the others. But in the time that I might ask you for something but not get it, can I create a feeling of security by being able to use the tools at hand that are going to make me feel as though I'm addressing those issues? And you can. Yes, we can teach you that and you can learn that.
Yeah, we can definitely show you that. And like, I know as an example, some people like to do, if their partner's on a date, they want to make that a special day that they do things for themselves and making that a habit and then seeing how that goes. Like that's one simple solution, not all of them. But I was smiling because you mentioned like the before care, the during care and after care exercise we just developed, which you gave to a client. And I think they quite liked it. I think it was a good one. So that's part of the program too.
Yeah. But it's really great about that list also, the during, before, and after care, is finding out what would be most reassuring to us, how we're able to identify that and then communicate that and see if the other person's able to feel that. But we also don't want to become overly dependent upon the other to deliver us. Ideally, it is from within. Since it's an inside job, creating that position of insecurity or having that insecurity, then it should also be within us in our inside job to be able to self-soothe and offer that remedy. So it comes both, right? We ask for the other, but we're not entirely dependent on the other to deliver us. We become self-empowered.
Yeah. Awesome. So those are the main three things. So introspection, communicate with yourself and others, and determine a remedy.
Yeah. Beautiful.
That was a fun talk.
Fun topic. Insecurity could be fun.
Not fun, but it's like I think it's like the biggest thing that comes up. Like I don't know for you, but with people I work with, insecurity and jealousy are like the number 1 and 2 like things that people struggle with the most. And I think it's why it's such a huge part of our group program and the work we do with people. Because I think once you can deal with some of those things, I think a lot of other things become a lot simpler in designing your awesome relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because if you go into any situation, any scenario, feeling insecure, you're going to have your defenses up and you're going to be less likely to participate fully in the opportunities. But when you can go at it from a place of love and security, well, then the world's your oyster. You can have a universe of abundance and know that you're going to be perfectly secure and A-okay with it.
Yeah.
perfectly being acceptable, right? That it's survival, not that it ever needs to be done perfect. It's like jealousy. You may come to a very good position of it and feel quite secure. It's not to say you'll never feel jealous or that you're never going to have some level of it, but that you feel as though it is manageable and that the pain associated with it is not greater than the experience, right? We want to have the experience, even if there is some level of discomfort. Can it be survivable level of discomfort? And it can be.
Can be.
Yes.
So if you need help with determining that remedy for you, we are here. You can reach out to us by DM, or you can book a call with us. We're happy to chat with you. We can see what's going on in your life and where you want to be. And if we can support you, we would definitely offer you that.
Sounds good.
And I wanted to say as well, if you do have suggestions or things you want us to talk about, please let us know. We want to know what we can do to help support you in your lives and relationships.
It's interesting because as you said that, if there's something they want us to talk about, immediately my perverse mind went, well, what about the things that they don't want us to talk about? And it's like so much of what's not being said, are areas of discomfort where we don't want to address these issues.
Yes, the things that we don't want to talk about are the very things we need to talk about.
Very often, which is why we try to say everything.
Everything.
Try and say everything. It's easy often to talk about the things we're wanting to, but how do we address the things that we might be less comfortable talking about, the insecure things?
Well, that's why we called the group Let's Talk Poly, because it was all about, when we were coming up with the name, you're like, well, you always say, let's talk about everything. And I was like, oh, Let's Talk Poly. Ooh, name. Anyway, well, that's it for today. Let us know in the comments if you have any thoughts about insecurity. Like I said, drop us a line if you want to chat with us. We're here.
And not just insecurity, whatever you want to talk about. Let us know. We love hearing from you.
We love hearing from you. Yes.
Okay.
Anytime.
Bye.
Bye. You're undoing your tie?
I am. It's the end of the show.
If you want to explore polyamory, open up a relationship, or try your hand at swinging, we can help. Check out our website at taranandre.com for information on our Poly Newbies digital course or our deeper dive open relationship and polyamory mastery program, where you get direct coaching from us. There's also other individual and couples coaching options there as well. Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk Polyamory podcast with TNA. Don't forget to subscribe and give us some love on your favorite podcasting platform. You can check out the show notes for any of the links to the courses or information we talked about today. Thanks, and have a fantastic and sexy day.